And one of the very first things I noticed was she had lost a lot of weight. I just assumed it was from the stress of losing her husband and everything her family had been through. But the more we talked about it, the more she shared with me that, during that time, that very difficult time for her family, her son started researching, why did his father have pancreatic cancer? What were the drivers? And they kept coming upon information and studies about nutrition and the role of nutrition in health. And these were things that no one had ever talked to them about. But more than anything, it's just about meeting people where they are and trying my best to understand, where you are in your journey in life, I guess, and how this might be part of a way for you to improve your overall health through lifestyle. Sometimes I tell my patients, my goal, if I do this right and we do this well, my goal is to never see you. If you're healthy and you're active and you're out there and you're living your best life, you don't have to come see me. And if I never see you, that's okay, because that tells me that you're living your best life. When you look long term, when you look at populations that live long, healthy lives, we should probably be doing what those populations are doing, which is have some activity every day, manage your stress, have good relationships or community. And then when you look at nutrition, it's mostly plants. It doesn't have to be 100%. It doesn't have to be completely vegan or vegetarian, but plants should be the basis of your overall eating pattern. And if you can do that, chances are you're going to be healthier than someone who doesn't adopt those lifestyle changes.
All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome, everybody, to our show. As always, I'm Dr. Sean Hashmi. This is selfprinciple.org. We are delighted to have you on the show. Self Principle, Sleep, Exercise, Love, and Food. It's a 501c3 nonprofit. I started this because my passion was, how do we take information that normally is very complicated, convoluted? People say nutrition is hard to understand. How do we simplify it? And how do we learn best practices from people who are already there, who are already doing it, who are serving as role models for all of us? So we've been delighted that on this show, we've had some of the most inspiring people come on. And today is absolutely no exception to that. Today, I actually have somebody I consider a really close friend, a colleague, somebody who I've learned a lot from and whose passion is frankly intoxicating. It's interesting, for this person, when I first started down this journey, he was so far down the rabbit hole and I saw his passion and it really ignited the spark in me. So without ado, let me introduce Ben. Ben, we are delighted to have you on the show. Let me ask you just to kind of tell people who you are, what you do. Let's start there.
Of course. Dr. Benjamin Hom, a family physician here in Bakersfield, California with Kaiser Permanente. Been interested in whole food, plant-based nutrition for about a decade now, and just really excited to be here. Sean, you've had some phenomenal guests on your show. Truly an honor for me to be part of your program.
Well, you've been an inspiration to me, so it's actually my honor to have you. Let me ask you, so you've been in this arena for a long time, and you've seen all sorts of fads come and go. First, let's talk about you. What inspired you to go down this road? Tell us about your journey.
It's really interesting when I think back to medical school and residency. Nutrition, I don't even think was on the map. So much of our time was spent learning about diagnosing and treating, which I think is the paradigm that most healthcare providers and physicians are in. People come in, you diagnose them, you give them a treatment, and things get better, or you believe them to get better. But back in 2011, 2012, it really was a patient experience that sort of awakened me or opened my eyes to the role of nutrition. And I had permission from the family to share this story. So Mr. Robert Park, gentleman, was one of my first patients here in Bakersfield. And he had been diabetic for a long time, kind of chronic issues, and just hadn't been feeling well. And one day he sent me a message that he noticed he was having some blood in his urine, some abdominal pain. And I told him that we would work it up, figure out what was going on. It ended up being a pancreatic mass, turning out to be pancreatic cancer. And unfortunately, once you find pancreatic cancer, kind of late stage, the prognosis is pretty grim. I would love to tell you that he went on a whole food plant-based diet and that cured him, and he's alive and well. But unfortunately, that wasn't the outcome. It wasn't until a few months after he had passed that his wife came in to see me, and one of the very first things I noticed was she had lost a lot of weight. I just assumed it was from the stress of losing her husband and everything her family had been through. But the more we talked about it, the more she shared with me that, during that time, that very difficult time for her family, her son started researching, why did his father have pancreatic cancer? What were the drivers? And they kept coming upon information and studies about nutrition and the role of nutrition in health. And these were things that no one had ever talked to them about. So towards the end of the visit, we were just chatting about this, and she asked me to read a book called Eat to Live by Dr. Joel Fuhrman, which I think was the very first introduction for me towards this concept of food as medicine, or nutrition as a way to both prevent and also treat disease. And after going through that book, it opened my eyes to other things like Forks Over Knives, which I think was just coming out at the time, T. Colin Campbell's book, The China Study. And just the more that I read, the more I realized that my nutritional knowledge was a deficit for me. And I really owed it to my patients, to myself, to take the time to learn more. And from there, it just kind of took off. Tried it for myself to see what impact it would have. My own health improved. And then as I started incorporating that into my practice, I found that a lot of patients were very open to the idea. No one had ever talked to them about nutrition, or really emphasized to them what they should be doing to improve their health, and either to prevent or treat some of the issues they were dealing with. And just from that experience with working with patients, it really just ignited a passion in me to continue to explore, to learn, to understand, and really make this part of my approach to treating each and every patient that I see.
So, it's fascinating. You bring up this story. As you know, my wife has lupus, and part of what really inspired me going into this area was, when I thought about self, and self is not something that was my idea. When you looked at the blue zones, for example, Okinawa, Japan, and all these places, Loma Linda, California, you found that all of them had, they were sleeping more, moving more, they practiced gratitude and kindness, and they ate a whole foods plant-based diet. But that was the spark for me to start looking for better things, because the way that her health was going, I didn't expect her to be alive today. And, we've been married since 2012, Valentine's Day. And we have two beautiful daughters, and we were told we would never have kids. And so this is an area, and when people say, well, why are you so passionate about this? What wakes you up so early in the morning and keep doing this while you're so tired? It's because I have 3 living, breathing reasons around me 24/7 that remind me that there's more people out there who could benefit from this. So I love that journey of yours. How has it been for your family as you started to go down this road? Was it hard? Was it difficult, especially for kids?
Well, I will tell you that, as for everyone, it's all about finding balance. It's difficult after you've grown up with a certain lifestyle, traditions, cultures, everything. Everyone has to find what works for them. And so for me, I've sort of leaned towards this principle of being more of a flexitarian. So I'm not a vegan or vegetarian. I tell my patients I may never be one. Even with the knowledge around the research and the literature, there's still the cultural aspect and the societal pressures and other things. So, we do our best. And that's what I tell my patients to do every day. Just do your best. It's okay to not do it perfectly. Progress over perfection. But in general, it has helped my family to be healthier. We spend more time, we're more thoughtful about what we're eating every day. We've definitely upped our consumptions of fruits and vegetables, probably dropped our intake of fast food dramatically compared to before when the kids were younger. I'm married, and I have 2 kids, 16 and 13. And it's a struggle sometimes because life is busy. Things come up, things that are expected and unexpected, and it's all a journey. But as long as you know that you can always come back to the basics, and that you have a solid understanding of what you should be doing for your health, just making the steps to get there, I think, is the hardest part. Overall, I think the influence it's had on my family, on our friends, our circle of friends, our extended family. I mean, they all sort of know that health and nutrition is something that I'm very passionate about. And they often will come to me with questions. And I always welcome that because it makes me feel like they're at least open to the concept. And when someone's open and exploring and willing to explore that further, that's a great time to share with them, your perspective and the potential benefits they could see.
It's fascinating. So my wife is Vietnamese, and my in-laws and all my extended family, it's a really big, heavy meat culture. Yes. And I never really understood that or appreciated. And in my own family, which is Pakistani, so we're Southeast Asian, meat was something that if you could afford it was great. And we grew up in very humble beginnings, so it was really hard. But when we came to America, I think at least until I finished medical school, I was just addicted to junk food. I mean, I went to McDonald's every day or Taco Bell because, when you don't have a lot of money and you have 50 cents in your pocket and you're really, really hungry, you look at what is the fastest way to fill that stomach, right? And it turned out that at least where I went to school in high school and then going on to college, there were fast food places everywhere, right? And you could go in, and if you had 50 cents or $1, that was, a huge meal. Now, granted, it was empty calories. It was really horrible for your heart, your kidneys, your lungs, and every part of your body. But when you're younger or when you don't have the information, you just don't know that. So as you deal with your patients, what do you find is the hardest thing about helping people to kind of steer towards a better path? What do you think are the challenges that people face?
Well, I think the first thing is just patients' level of interest. Not when you meet with people, you would assume that everyone wants to be healthy and that if there was something that they could do on their own, instead of taking medications or taking a pill for their problem, that they would be open to that. But I've been surprised that that's not always the case. And I'm not blaming anyone because we all have different stressors. We all have different priorities. Things sometimes other than our health takes priority, whether it's financially putting food on the table, family stress, dealing with a sick loved one or elderly parents or a sick child. Everyone is dealing with something different. And so when I'm trying to engage a patient around this, I think in the beginning, when you get very excited about nutrition, you just want to share that message with everyone, regardless of whether they want to hear it. And I found that just doesn't land well with a lot of people. So you really have to explore it. And what is their openness to it? What is their willingness to learn about it? Maybe it's just providing them with a booklet and a handout and just saying, hey, take some time to look at this. And when you're ready or interested, we can chat about it. Whereas others who are really at that point of they're open to the idea or making that decision, or they're motivated to make some changes, then you kind of dive in a little deeper and try to understand, what are their stressors, what are their main drivers of their behavior. But more than anything, it's just about meeting people where they are and trying my best to understand, where you are in your journey in life, I guess, and how this might be part of a way for you to improve your overall health through lifestyle. And sometimes I tell my patients, my goal, if I do this right and we do this well, my goal is to never see you. If you're healthy and you're active and you're out there and you're living your best life, you don't have to come see me. And if I never see you, that's okay, because that tells me that you're living your best life.
I love that. I love that. This concept of meeting people where they're at is so important, because there were research studies showing that when it comes to shaming patients, so when a person comes in, let's say they're overweight or they have an issue going on, it turned out that the healthcare provider, the physicians, were the number one people responsible for shaming people. And then number two was actually your family members. How crazy is that? And when patients, as a result of it, they come to you and they say, you ask them, well, doc, how much, what should I do? And the doctor says, well, how much do you eat? And so patients, without even wanting to lie or wanting to deceive, this is just a reaction on average, they would tell their doctor that they ate 30% less calories than they actually did. And they moved 30% more than they actually did. it's a fascinating phenomenon because we're trying to please. And in our culture, for example, when my parents are on my side of the family, they go to the doctors, they'll nod yes to everything the doctor says, and they won't do any of it. But they don't want to disagree with the doctor, so they'll just keep nodding.
It's an interesting concept. I think in some ways, the physician in the past has had a very paternalistic role, or sort of a parenting role almost, where we tell you, do this, do this, do this, and then we get disappointed when you come back and you've done none of them. It's almost like a parent-child relationship. But I think more and more we're learning that doesn't work. Now that people have access to so much more information than they did before, whether it's through social media, whether it's through the internet, the people are taking the time to learn more and read more and look for ways to improve their health. And the doctor is sometimes no longer their most trusted source of information. So it really creates this interesting dynamic, I think, where our goal or our role should be to understand kind of where someone's mindset is. Maybe they have a friend who went on the keto diet and did phenomenal, dropped a ton of weight, and is just living their best life after going keto. And they're just so frustrated or fed up that they're willing to try anything. But my job, I think, is to help people understand that when you look long term, when you look at populations that live long, healthy lives, we should probably be doing what those populations are doing, which is have some activity every day, manage your stress, have good relationships or community. And then when you look at nutrition, it's mostly plants. It doesn't have to be 100%. It doesn't have to be completely vegan or vegetarian, but plants should be the basis of your overall eating pattern. And if you can do that, chances are you're going to be healthier than someone who doesn't adopt those lifestyle changes.
And I think you hit on a very important point, which is this concept of health. So when we look at weight loss, there are so many ways to lose weight. And a lot of them are not healthy. I mean, I can put somebody on literally nothing and just staple their lips together and they're going to lose a ton of weight. That doesn't mean it's healthy. The ketogenic diet, the risk of insulin resistance, the fatty liver that you end up getting, the plaques that form inside your vessels, all of those things are stuff that happen. But on the outside, you look very, very healthy. It's on the inside that you're absolutely unhealthy. So there's this concept of I want to lose weight versus this concept of I want to be healthy. And what's fascinating is we now have an unhealthy plant-based diet. So many people are jumping on the bandwagon. And, when you and I sort of got into this interest area of looking at nutrition and plant-based diets, we only understood one concept, right? Eat whole foods, eat lots more fruits and vegetables, right? Beans, lentils, seeds, nuts, all that good stuff. But now it's different. There are so many packages. I tell you, people are slapping the label vegan on the craziest packages where you're like, of course it's vegan. But because it has a label on it, people jump on it. And then you look at how much salt it has. Then you look at how much phosphorus it has, how much of saturated fats it has. And it's enormous. And in kidney disease, when we advocate people have a whole foods plant-based diet, there's some really interesting population data that shows people following an unhealthy plant-based diet, they do worse. And people who follow a healthy plant-based diet, they do better. And the difference there is all of the additives, the processing, same stuff that we worked so hard for years to fight against. Now we're finding ourselves, it's ending up in our backyard.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's exciting that there are more companies, products out there to help people. I say it's almost like transitioning to a healthier diet. It's kind of a stepwise approach, but always coming back to that idea that the less processed something is, the more whole it is, more natural it is, chances are the healthier it's going to be for you. But I also get it. People struggle. They're not going from here to here is just not that easy. And if there are things that can help you sort of move in that direction, I think it's okay. But understand, I tell people, I'm not here to make you a vegan or vegetarian, and I don't want you to eat tons of vegan and vegetarian processed foods or junk foods. It's really about eating more fruits and vegetables, whole grains, beans, lentils, nuts, and seeds. And if you make that the majority of what you consume, and the one-off meal here or there, the junk food day or whatever, sure, it's not the best for you, but it's in the long run, it's probably not going to have as detrimental effect to you as if you were doing it every day. So again, it's all that progression. It's a stepwise approach. I think Dean Ornish talks about, a spectrum. We're all in kind of a spectrum, and moving towards a healthier, whole food, plant-based diet would benefit all of us in terms of our health.
And I'll tell you, there's some companies that I've seen now that are just doing phenomenal work. There are meal delivery services that I'm seeing where the foods are such great quality, and my kids will eat them, which is like the ultimate test, right? So
yes.
You have quality and you have taste in there, and that's phenomenal. And that's where we're also looking to help them get the exposure they need, because they're going up against these big food giants that have cornered the market. And whenever you have one of the big food giants come out with a product that's supposedly healthy, that's where you got to look at all the ingredients, because most of those things you can't pronounce. Versus a lot of these new startups, they're really focusing on, we're going to do good for the world. We're going to do good for the environment. We're going to do good for the people. We have these core values, and that's why we started these businesses. And that's pretty phenomenal to see that movement is occurring.
No, I would agree with you. I think on the other end, we're challenged in that we become a community of convenience. I mean, the fact that you can go on your phone now and have fast food delivered to you without even leaving your house, the convenience factor has come into play as well. And there's, again, lots of businesses driving that convenience of making it so easy for you to, fulfill whatever craving you're having at the moment. And it's such a struggle, because I think all of us are just trying to adapt to the pace of change that we're seeing in the world. I mean, I think if we think back over the last 10 years, just think about all the ways your life has changed because of technology and the impact that's having. How many hours do we now spend staring at our phones, scrolling through social media, being influenced by what we're seeing? Whereas before, we're constantly being bombarded by news, up-to-date news, 24/7. I remember growing up, we watched the news once a day. It was 30 minutes. It was ABC Nightly News with Peter Jennings. And that was our news for the day. Whereas now, every single event that happens in the world is being broadcast. And we're just being overwhelmed by information. I think people are struggling to make sense of everything that they're dealing with. And I think what I tell people is everything that you allow to come into you is influencing you in some way. So a lot of the negative things that we read about or hear about or see, it's stressful whether you believe it or not, whether you believe it's impacting you or not. So again, all of us are trying to deal with this new world that we're living in. I think the pace of change is only going to accelerate, which is going to make it even harder because we're so distracted now by everything that we're seeing and all the news that we're getting. It makes it harder for us to focus on the things in the end that may really matter.
I think that's exactly the challenge is the world is moving faster. At least we have more access to things. And so we think the world is truly moving faster, even though it truly is not. But when you deal with patients, so let's say, somebody listening to this show today may be just starting out, or they've struggled. How do you start with somebody who's at the beginning of their journey? And, clearly, before I went into this, I used to be a personal trainer, and a challenge that I had was I took a weekend course to get my license. And then after that, I started training people. And so all I knew was that a low carbohydrate diet was the fastest way for me to get my clients to lose weight, because if they didn't start to see results in the first week, they wouldn't stick around. So I had to do something drastic. And we never focused on the inside of the person. We focused on the outside. And then in my clinical practice, when I first started, what I found was that we had a diabetic diet that conflicted with the kidney diet. So then the patients would come back and say, but, doc, I went to my dietitian who has, diabetes advice for me, and it's completely opposite of what you told me. So people get so much information that they're lost. But if you have somebody who is struggling and frustrated and want to change, how do you start, or where do you start, or where would you advise them to say, hey, this is what I think is a good starting point. And if we're assuming that they're reaching out because they're ready to change, if they're listening to this, it's because they're ready to make that change.
Right. No, that's a great question. And it's something that I probably struggle with every day. And I'm always trying to refine kind of my approach or finding the best way to counsel people. And I think, unfortunately, there's not just one way to do it. For people, obviously, who are listening, who are kind of intrigued by the idea, very similar to what I did, take the time to make sure that you really understand the information and that you believe it. If you're going to jump into this because Dr. Ha or Dr. Hashmi told you to do it, but you're not really on board, you don't really believe it, you don't think it's actually real, or that this is truly a healthy way to go about it, chances are when you don't get the results you're looking for, you're going to drop off. You're going to shoot to the next thing or try something different because you're just not getting the results. But I think if you take the time, and there's so many more resources now than ever before, through videos, documentaries, websites, expert colleagues out there who are passionate about this. There's so much opportunity for you to take the time to really explore and I don't want to call it research, but investigate the concept and make sure that in the end you understand you have come to the decision that this is the right thing for you. Because I think once you make that decision for yourself, you'll be more committed to actually following through with a plan and try to be consistent with it. So that would be the first thing is, I used to do a once a month workshop before the pandemic. And we have a farmer's market here in Bakersfield on Sundays. And I would host a workshop once a month and it's just open to the public. And I always started the presentation by saying, I'm not here to convince you of anything. I'm just here to share with you information that I think you might find helpful. And if after our conversation, you think it's something you're interested in and you would like to explore more, I'm open. I'm here as a resource. I'm here to help. And if it's not for you, it's not for you. That's okay. Because I think people need to be able to decide for themselves that this is what they want to do versus someone telling them that this is what you have to do. So I think that's the first step. And then second, if you are now on board, I think more than ever, find a community. You need people to support you, people to encourage you, people who have gone through that struggle, the beginning struggle, and who can share with you tips and ideas on how they push through it or what worked for them. And I think that's where social media can be a very powerful, positive influence, is by finding that community that will support you through this journey. I'm always inspired to read testimonials, people who share their journey, who have dramatically transformed their lives just with a simple idea. And sometimes it's not because their doctor told them to. It's because they read a story or a friend encouraged them or someone just mentioned to them, hey, you should check this out. So if anything, do your investigate, I guess, do your own research, really make sure that you feel committed to this concept and you truly believe that it's the right way to go. And then find the community that's going to support you. And unfortunately, that may not be your family and friends. They may not be on board. They may be your biggest distractors or biggest detractors from what you're trying to do. And they may not even support you for different reasons. But I think you can look outside of that and find people who are there to help you, who genuinely want only what's best for you. And I think if you can connect with them, your chances of being successful will be even greater.
That's such powerful words, because I tell you, on my end, my approach when I started was, I've always been, somebody who prides himself in evidence-based. So I read a lot of studies and so forth. But what I find is and I learned this lesson from our mutual colleagues, Dr. Steve Lewenda. His approach to patients was he would share the stories. He would give them hope. He would inspire them. Versus my approach was, here's a randomized control study that had N of 500 and showed, this and,
right.
and it's statistically significant. So you got to listen. And people didn't care so much. They wanted to know that existed. But kind of what you describe is what they were looking for was a community, was a sense of hope, a sense of purpose. And I love the fact that both you and Steve are so good about helping people to feel like there is hope. That's very inspiring.
No, I would agree. And Steve is a good friend as well, and he's just done amazing work. And to hear some of the patient stories that his work has generated has just been inspiring to me, and encourages me when I feel like I'm spinning my wheels here, to keep going, to keep encouraging. Just this past week, I had a gentleman brand new to me, and referred from one of our specialty colleagues who's a GI physician, pediatric GI. Actually, he's the father of one of the patients, and he just kept Dr. Tipton. I don't know if you know James Tipton. He is a
Oh,
big
yeah.
advocate, and kept kind of encouraging the father and the child to be open to the concept. This gentleman had been diabetic for 15 years, was on 2 oral meds, insulin as well, never had good control. And he finally made a decision after hearing this idea again and again over months. Not saying you have to do this, but please be open to the idea. He finally took a chance, really to prove Dr. Tipton wrong, to show him that it doesn't work. And what did he find? Within 3 months, he's off of his insulin. He's lost 30 pounds. He's down to just the minimum amount of medication for his diabetes. He feels great. And now he's become, very vocal advocate, trying to influence his friends and family. I think one of the hardest things for me, I think for anyone who does see success, is you see success, you want to share that with everyone around you. And again, not everyone is ready or willing to hear what you have to say. And in some ways, by being such a vocal advocate, you can actually be off-putting to people, where they're like, well, that's fine for you, but that's not good for me, or that's not right for me. And people often felt a sense of judgment, like, Dr. Ha's judging me because I'm not willing to do his plant-based diet, both my patients and even my colleagues. And I had to take a step back and understand that even for me, when I first started exploring this concept, I was resistant. I was thinking, why should I try this? Why is this important? Is it even worth bothering with? Why hasn't anyone taught this to me before? So, if anything, I just try to encourage people to at least be open-minded, and if and when they're ready to learn more, or would like to learn more, that's where I'm more than happy to step in and be of service to them.
It's a fascinating point that you bring up about how when you go down this road, you can have a lot of resistance. When I was first asked to go into my role of the nutrition lead, what I was really asked to do was to kind of clear up all of this, dust that was floating around this concept of a plant-based diet, because most people at that time, this is now going back, a decade now, really didn't understand the concept. And they were like, well, this is people who are essentially fanatic. And, I created this talk. It was called A Scientific Approach to Nutrition.
Right, I remember.
And I went through at least 100, 150 versions of it, because I would read, the first version was, I read hundreds and hundreds of studies, and I created this. And, the more I read, the more confused I got. There was this study, but it conflicted with this study. And every version that I did, it was becoming easier and clearer on what the data lied. And I read more studies, and I could see where the flaws in the studies were, where initially I was like, this study said this study said the opposite. And the reason was why. And as all of those things became more and more clear, it undoubtedly was this thing that this is the road. The road is, like Michael Pollan says, eat food, not too much, mostly plants. Go down this road, and you have all of these things that get better and better. And then all of the other studies that were conflicting, you could find exactly why. If you were dealing with migraines, for example, the most effective thing for migraines, yes, it was ketogenic. If you were dealing with seizures, it was ketogenic. But what was interesting on those studies were they did the ketogenic, and then they would transition off to something else. They couldn't maintain it. Studies had 50, 60% dropout rates where people couldn't maintain that. But what you see in, sort of the approach you have, which is, plant forward or plant focused, is it's sustainable. It's sustainable for you, it's sustainable for your family, and it's sustainable for the world around you. And people who say, well, what the argument that a plant-based diet helps the environment doesn't necessarily hold true. It's interesting. Dr. Kim Williams says there's only two kinds of people, right? Who have read the data or not read the data. And it's so true, is when you read the data and you read the environmental impact we're having, the way the planet is headed is it's very difficult to see how will our children grow up. Will they even have the ability to be able to go outside and enjoy the sunset like we do? Or are we making everything so polluted that jumping in the ocean becomes this whole thing of what am I going to catch today? All of those things are very, very real. But there's this concept of trying to create balance and harmony. And I really appreciate the fact that you have this way of doing it where it makes it easier. But that doesn't mean you don't get ostracized. It doesn't mean you don't have your colleagues who may disagree with you or want to argue with you or debate you. I get a lot of things where people want to debate me and I'm like, listen, if I'm wrong, I'm happy to apologize. I'm happy to bring you the data. And when I do it is I present the data. And when the data changes, I present the data. Right? I try not to be opinion-based, but data-driven. And that's always been my motto is follow the research, high-quality research, and it'll lead you down the road. So, for yourself in your journey, and now, you've been down this road for so long, what do you think have been some of the biggest challenges with you and, the folks around you, whether it's your family or it's your colleagues, in terms of them seeing who you're becoming, how you're becoming?
I think more than anything, it goes back to the feeling like when you have new knowledge that you want to share, you try and share it and you just hit this wall where people, it seems like they just don't want to hear it, or they make fun of you or they joke about it, or again, they feel like you're judging them when really you're not. You're trying to, if at all possible, help them. I think being willing to accept that for some people, this is just not, they're just either not ready, or this is just not something that they wish to pursue for themselves, and to be okay with that. Again, if I meet with a patient, this is always interesting. I see so many patients every day who, some say they're after a conversation, we spend the extra time, they're so excited and they're ready. They're like, I'm going to do this, and you're going to see, doc, in 6 weeks or whatever, I'm going to be a new person. And then they disappear and I never see them again. And I just don't know what happened, but chances are they weren't successful. Then I have another patient who's a complete skeptic, like, no, I don't think so. And I say, well, that's okay. I'm just here to give you information. And they show up 3 months later, 6 months later, and they've done the best. They've lost weight, whatever. And it's so hard for me because I can never figure out who's going to do well and who's not going to do well. And so to me, that just encourages me to share that message with everyone, and not feeling like I have to pick and choose who's going to be ready for this idea. It's more just, I'm just a messenger. I'm just here to provide information. If it helps you, great. If not, that's okay. I'm here. We have other ways to help you with whatever you're dealing with from a medical perspective. But I think for someone who is excited, or who's an advocate of nutrition and health, or a nutrition first approach to managing issues, just not getting frustrated when you're not seeing that everyone's on board. I mean, we'd like to just think that we can snap our fingers and that everyone's convinced. But as you said, data alone often doesn't convince people to make a behavior change. There's a very strong emotional component that comes into play, where people emotionally, I think, have to be ready or invested and feel like the effort that they're going to put forth is going to be worth the potential pain they're going to experience for along different lines, whether that's emotionally, socially, from a health perspective. So there's so many factors that come into play, and I think the challenge we see sometimes is we would just assume that data is enough to convince someone of to do the right thing. But as you've seen from the research and the literature, there's just so much data out there, and trying to make sense of it all is very difficult, which is why I turn to you. I know you take the time to do the research, to read the studies, not just read the conclusions or the summary of the study, you actually dive into it to make sure that what you're reading really is presenting the clear picture or a true picture of what the study showed. So I don't have the time to do that. I trust you as my colleague, an expert, to do that for me. I trust Dr. Michael Greger to do the same thing. And because I trust you, I believe the messages that you're giving and the information that you're sharing. And in doing so, it allows me to more focus on that one-on-one interaction with people, to explore more. Help me understand where you are. What are your barriers? I wish I had more than 20 minutes to do this with every patient. And this is part of my struggle is, finding that time or carving out that time within an office visit to have that conversation. But more and more, if I don't take the time to understand, who you are, where you are, what your challenges are, and even if this is something you're ready to even explore, then I'm not doing my job as your physician.
It's a fascinating point, and I struggle exactly in the same place as how to make that connection.
Mm-hmm.
The role of a doctor, in my humble opinion, is that of a teacher, right? We're teachers more often than we are actually curing anything.
Correct.
We're helping people to say, go home and do this, go home and do that, go home and ice this, go home and take this pill. But we're also teaching them, and from a teaching perspective, it's an ongoing struggle. And
Mm-hmm.
I tell you, I have a lot of regrets. I do. I have patients who I've seen over my decades of practice where they've gotten worse. And I always ask myself, could I have done something differently?
Mm-hmm.
When I first started here at my current job, I had one patient on his deathbed. The only thing he said to me, we sat down and he said, "Look, doc, my only regret is I wish I had listened to you." Mm. And it hurt me so bad. And, people were like, that you shouldn't take that personally. But I was so emotional over that one statement. And I said, gosh, I failed him. I wish, should I have been harder? Should I have done something different? And I spent a lot of time trying different approaches, getting mad at them, trying to be their friend, reaching out to the family members. And even now, I remember my patients, thousands, and there are those few that they stay with you. So
right.
I don't really have a good answer either. I know that, what I gained from doing, for example, these interviews is I've learned to be a lot more flexible, to be humble, to realize I don't have all the answers. And every interview, I take something and I think it makes me better. It's almost selfish in a way that I find like these interviews give me more to become better than I'm giving the person that I'm interviewing or even the audience sometimes, because I feel like, wow, there are these nuggets I can take back and try, but I'm just literally a beginner when it comes to human connection. And it's the hardest part.
It is. And in today's environment, we have such limited time to really make a strong connection. When you think about it, let's say I have a new patient in my office and they're scheduled for a visit, a 20-minute visit. I'm supposed to walk into that room and make a connection with you within the first few minutes of us even meeting. And then I'm jumping into very personal questions about your health and everything else. And I think we're fortunate to be in that role as a physician where people kind of look to us. That's sort of the environment that we work in. But it's so hard because we're not going to connect with every patient. I know I'm not the right physician for every person. And that's a struggle sometimes when you kind of sense that we just don't see things on this at this same level, and we may never. And would you be better served seeing another physician, because I may not be able to give you, what you're looking for as a patient, and my skills as a physician are just challenged because we just cannot see eye to eye. But I think when you cut through all that, in the end, I believe what people want most is to know that you care, and that you care for their health, that you want what's best for them, that you genuinely want them to live a healthy, fulfilling life. And I think, all, as you mentioned, we're teachers. All we can do is share information, share knowledge, even as we evolve in our own knowledge and understanding in our own journey, I guess, in life, and try to incorporate that into our practice. But I think in the end, no matter the outcome, if people genuinely feel that you cared about them, even when the outcome is not ideal, I think in the end, in some ways, we have done our job as a physician.
That's awesome. I love that message. And, I think as long as I've known you, you have embodied each one of those qualities so well. And even for me, as I've gone through my journey, you're somebody that I've always looked up to. And the fact that you never judge anybody, including myself, in terms of where we are in our journey, where we are in our life. So I think whoever is your patient is absolutely lucky and fortunate to have you as their physician, as their teacher, as their mentor. And especially for me, I'm honored and I'm grateful that I have you as a friend, as a colleague, as a thought partner. And along, my journey, you have helped me in so many ways where I've never even expressed my gratitude to you. So I just want you to know how grateful I am for everything that you do. And if you don't hear it, know that there are people out there who are so moved and changed by the message that you're doing.
No, thank you, Sean. That means the world to me. And I have to say, sometimes it is a struggle, with everything that we have all had to deal with this year, the uncertainty of the pandemic, so many other issues happening within our country. I think we've all been kind of thrown in, and it's been a very difficult. This has probably been one of the hardest years of all of our lives for different reasons. But through that all, I think I continue to look for those opportunities to help people, because again, I feel like that's my job as a physician. I think in some ways, working with my colleagues and just being someone who is willing to share this idea, if a physician friend or colleague is interested in learning more, I see that as an honor for me, that they would be open enough to approach me about wanting to learn more, or to find some tips, or even ways that they can do a better job of working with their own patients. Because I think then my influence extends beyond just the person that I'm seeing sitting in front of me. And the other thing I struggle with is sometimes I wonder, what more could I be doing? I see the work that you're doing with the self-principle, the work that Dr. Batiste is doing with Slave Food Project, and I wonder, should I jump in as well, and put out content and do things? But for me right now, having a young family and a full-time practice, and even the patients that are sitting in front of me, I've kind of made that decision to just focus on what's in front of me at the moment, and be okay with that, even though I feel like there is an opportunity maybe in the future to be doing more. So, again, I just thank you for all the work that you're doing. Really phenomenal. I've enjoyed being a subscriber to your channel, listening to your lectures. I always learn something new that I then hopefully try and take and incorporate into my practice. And I'm just honored to have you as a friend and a colleague.
Thank you. And whatever we can do to support each other in the future. So as we bring this together, I always ask every guest that we have on the show, what are your sort of top tips or advice, whether it's 2, 3, 4, doesn't matter. But I always want to leave people with what you think are the best tips that you can offer them for wherever they are in their journey on how to improve or live their best life.
Right. And this may be a little different. I've listened to your other podcasts, and everyone jumps in with tips and ideas. But just thinking about where we are in the world, I think number one is be kind. Be kind to the people around you. Be kind to yourself. We're all dealing with so much, and sometimes we feel like we're failing because we're not where we want to be. Whether it's with our health, with our family, with financially, where you are in life. And I think we're all struggling with that to a certain extent. So, be kind to the people you meet. We're all struggling with different things, and you just never know what's really beneath the surface versus what you see in front of you. So number one, be kind. Number two is be humble. I think, to some people are just so set in their views that they're unwilling to even explore or be curious about learning a different perspective. And I think when we do that, we kind of miss out. For me as a physician, it really took a little bit of humility for me to say, you know what, maybe I should read that book, Eat to Live. Maybe my patient does have something to share with me, or I can learn from her or from another physician. And unless I'm humble enough to say, I do have more to learn, or I don't know it all, then I'm really missing that opportunity to become a better physician and a better teacher and a better friend and colleague. So being kind and being humble. Number three would be curious. There's so much information out there, and you'll hear so many different perspectives. And again, it's all about kind of sifting through the information and trying to figure out what really resonates with you. But be curious and be open to learning. And I think if you do that, there's an opportunity that more and more with the information that you learn, you can take steps to live a better life. And I think in the end, the last thing would be to be grateful. You really focus on gratitude in all the work that you do, to feel grateful for your family, your kids, your friends, your colleagues, the opportunity you have as a physician. And I think if we all spent more time each day thinking about the things that we're grateful for and just really appreciating them, it will help us to better face the challenges that we have every day. So those would be my tips. I know they're not quite focused on how to get started on a plant-based journey, but I think if you can start there by being a little bit introspective and thinking through just kind of where you are at this point in your life, and take a few steps to be kind to yourself, to be humble and open to new ideas, to be curious and to be grateful. That will then position you to better take that step towards living a longer, healthier life.
I love it. Be kind, be humble, be curious, be grateful. Wonderful. And I tell you, of all of the guests I've had, this is probably the best advice, because most advice is about eat this, not that. This is about how to live. And I don't think we have too many people helping us to start down that journey. Because if you learn to live better, all those other simple, small pieces, they'll come together. This is the foundation that you're going to build your house on. And what a great foundation. Dr. Benjamin Ha, thank you for being on the show today. We are honored. We're grateful. Last thing is how do people get a hold of you on social media? What are your channels and so forth?
I wish I had a bigger social media presence, but I really don't at this point. If you happen to be on Facebook, I did create a page called Plant-Based Bakersfield. I am a board member for Plant Pure Communities, which is a nonprofit led by Nelson Campbell, who is one of T. Colin Campbell's, his oldest son. And they encourage people to create pods in your own communities that help people learn more about plant-based nutrition. So here in Bakersfield, I just started a very small pod. The only thing I have on Facebook is a page called Plant-Based Bakersfield, but I did link to a lot of different resources that I think are helpful and inspiring. Some of your stuff is on there as well. So Plant-Based Bakersfield would be a good place to start. On Twitter and Instagram, I do have a handle at Flexitarian MD. What you might find though is it's kind of all over the map. It's not really focused on just whole food plant-based nutrition, but it's just something that I enjoy kind of dabbling in at the moment. But no, that's my handle on social media, and again, Plant-Based Bakersfield may be where you can find maybe some past lectures that I've done in the community, talks I've given, and just links to other resources. And I just encourage you maybe from there to jump off and connect to other resources out there. There's just so much more information now than ever before. You may not get it from your physician or your healthcare provider, but even outside of that, you can find a community who's there to support you.
Phenomenal. We'll have all of those links in the show notes. Dr. Benjamin Ha, thank you so much. And thanks everyone for checking us out this time.
Thank you, Sean.